not have my glasses. I would have a problem.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being with us this afternoon for this press conference to present the preliminary statement of findings and conclusions from the election observation mission sent by the OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights for yesterday's mayoral runoff elections here in Georgia. Presenting our statement today will be the head of the OSCE ODIHR mission, Corinne Jonker. With us also on the podium this afternoon, Harold Jepson, who is the deputy head of the mission. There will be an opportunity after the presentation of the findings for the media to ask questions. But before that, with no more ado, please, Corinne.
Thank you very much, Tom. Gamar Joba, good afternoon. I can say again, would like to welcome you and thank you for coming to our press conference. This time I intend to share with you the OSCE ODIHR election observation mission's preliminary findings and conclusions on the second round of the local elections, covering the period from 22nd October up to this morning. Since we already presented our comprehensive assessment on the phases up to the first round, I will refrain from mentioning these again today. Our observation mission covered the second round elections with a core team based in Tbilisi and 12 long-term observers working in the 6 districts where the runoffs were held. We have all been in country since the start of the election campaign. And last week we were joined by 76 short-term observers responsible for the observation of the different elements of the election day procedures. Polling station opening, voting, counting, and tabulation of the votes. Our key findings are that, first, the 12 November mayoral runoffs in the 6 districts were well administered and the candidates were able to campaign freely and fundamental freedoms were generally respected. Again, same as in the first round. Second, restrictions on campaigning through media and on candidates' rights to withdraw negatively affected the competitiveness of the runoff contest. These are just 2 of the issues that highlight the need to improve the legal framework. Third, in between the 2 rounds, the high number of complaints dismissed on procedural or formalistic grounds, this undermined candidates' and voters' right to an effective remedy, as well as the public confidence in dispute resolution. And finally, that the second round election day proceeded in a smooth and professional manner, with voting, counting, and tabulation assessed in positive terms, while instances of possible intimidation and pressure on voters raise concern. Now allow me to elaborate on these different points. The election administration at all levels handled the preparations in a generally professional and timely manner, including in ensuring the full membership of lower commissions and by providing additional training. The legal framework generally provides an adequate basis for the democratic conduct of elections, but leaves these and more aspects of the second round under-regulated and ambiguous. Runoffs are held between the 2 candidates with the most first-round votes, although the United National Movement announced it would not take part in the second round. As the election code does not permit second-round candidates to withdraw, this essentially left 2 of the 6 races uncontested and compromised the right of the 3rd place contestant to stand. This shows the need for further reform of legal framework that I already have mentioned. The freedom of expression was respected in the media during the 2nd round campaign. But again, due to the ambiguous legal framework, although the official campaign period did not pause between the 2 rounds, instructions to broadcasters from the media regulator meant they could only begin allocating free airtime and offering paid advertisements on the 2nd of November, after the CEC set the date for the runoffs. This limited the opportunity for contestants to campaign through the media. Some local outlets provided regular coverage, but the runoffs were largely ignored in the national media, with the ruling Georgian Dream Party dominating the coverage of political news. Given the predominance of one political party, I would like to stress that this position comes with the responsibility to ensure that reforms to address the shortcomings mentioned are carried out in a consultative process, involving all electoral stakeholders and ensuring a level playing field for all wishing to compete as candidates. Some 1,000 complaints were filed after the 1st round with the central and district election commissions. They were reviewed in an open and collegial manner, respecting due process guarantees and legal deadlines. However, many were dismissed on procedural or formalistic grounds, and this undermined candidates' and voters' right to effective remedy and public confidence in the dispute resolution process. Different from the 1st round is the misuse of state resources, what was not raised as a major concern during this 2nd round. Then election day procedures. They were conducted in a smooth and professional manner. The overall assessment of the entire process on election day was predominantly positive. Adherence to procedures improved notably during the counting, due to a maybe also simpler process, but also better preparedness of officials. Large groups of people, including party and candidate activists, gathered outside many polling stations. In some instances, we noticed that it influenced and even intimidated people who came to vote. We also noted indications of systematic recording of voter data outside and inside polling stations, with the aim of contacting voters who had not yet voted and to pressure them to come to vote. Proxies of parties or candidates kept record of voters who voted inside the polling station. To a positive note, and adding to transparency, the CEC uploaded all PEC results, protocols on its website and announced preliminary results at 3 o'clock this morning. These are our most important findings. But additionally, in our statement, for example, voter registration is mentioned and also issues of campaign finance. For these, and even also for more in-depth information on the earlier mentioned subjects, I would really like to invite you to take a look at the preliminary statement. Copies of the statement in Georgian and in English will be available at the table on your way out. And in about 8 weeks, this assessment will be followed by a final report, which will also include recommendations to assist Georgia in addressing the issues I have mentioned today. I want to emphasize that this is the purpose of our election observation activities in the first place, to assist participating states in improving their electoral processes. And I know that ODIHR remains ready to cooperate with the authorities here and in following up on these recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Corinne. As I mentioned earlier, we now have time for questions from the media. I'll ask you if you do have a question to first raise your hand. We'll have a microphone brought to you. Before you ask your question, please, if you could just give your name and the media outlet you represent.
Wait a minute, I don't have English.
Sophie Zurabiani, TV company So question is connected, is okay?
Yeah,
question is connected to pressure on voters' will. You prefer in Georgian, okay. ჩემი კითხვა შეიძლება შემდეგს ამ შევისებაზე კონტროლად შეფასდა გარკვეული აქტივობები როგორც პირველ ასევე მეორე ტურში ადგილობრივი არასამთავრობოების მიერ და თქვენ ახსენეთ აქტივისტები რომლებიც შეკრებილი არიან უბნის გარეთ და ხშირად ზეგავლენას ახდენენ ამ მრჩეველზე ამ კუთხით თუ უნდა ველოდოთ თქვენს რეკომენდაციას საბოლოო ანგარიში
We indeed saw, and I already mentioned, large group of people standing outside the polling stations, and in some cases, indeed, influencing and intimidating the voters. This is indeed a practice that is very deplorable, and we would certainly come with recommendations on this issue. And it's not, you know, what the dilemma is that sometimes the information from inside the polling station was carried out and provided to people standing outside who were then able to follow up on the voters' data from the table of the registers. And that is a practice which should not happen. And even the task force, the interagency task force, had a recommendation on this issue that it should not happen, and we observed that again, as in the first round, it was the case.
Do we have any further questions? Anyone else? If so, raise your hand.
May I just add one? Okay, that's fine. It's fine. Go ahead, and I can add.
Before, or you can do after. I think it's better to do it after you answer your question.
Thank you very much for the question. If you ask me about Ozurgeti, I of course will answer you to it, but we don't give specific statements on what happened in the specific races. But of course, our long-term observers and also our short-term observers were also in Ozurgeti and observed what happened there. Again, also in Ozurgeti, there were cases of, actually mainly in Ozurgeti, next to Borjomi, there were these large groups of people standing outside and using the information from inside the polling station to follow up. But I don't know if you refer specifically to what happened last evening in the polling station. Is that what your question is about? Or? Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed, in PC 59, The independent candidate was afraid that he would lose the votes casted for him in that polling station, so we organized a protest. Our observers were not at that moment in the PEC, but we were at the DEC and know that the information was provided and handed over to the DEC. And after the tabulation, it appeared that the independent candidate won. For us now, it all seems to have been finally wrapped up orderly, but we have to wait and see if complaints will be filed, and we will still be in country. The final results will only be published in 11 days. And in the meantime, the DEC will have the opportunity to deal with the complaint if it's followed up by that. And then our LTOs and also the core team will still be there to look into how it is dealt with.
Deborah Wild, German journalist. My question is, you mentioned that there are problems in the playing field. Campaign finance is one, media is the other. Do you have specific recommendations considering how to level the playing field? And a question that comes with it, do you feel that there needs to be a awareness raised of what it means to be in power, the responsibility that comes with it, as you mentioned, as well as for the opposition in terms of, that withdrawing from elections might mean not your role as an opposition, even if you are in danger of losing these elections or not winning them, but that being in opposition is a role of itself to play and is necessary in a democratic society.
Yeah. Thank you very much. The level playing field and cases that I mentioned that maybe jeopardize the level playing field in the second round all have to do with the legal framework, especially focusing on the second round. And it really should be looked into. It's ambiguous, it's under-regulated, and we for sure will come up with recommendations on this issue. It's an important issue. It's not the first time that we recommend this. It's already mentioned after our observation of the parliamentary elections, but we hope that the government will take notice of it and take time to really look into it and work on it, so that when we are back next time, that maybe things will be changed.
I think there are other.
Sorry.
Your statement on the responsibility for power with Georgian Dream and on the opposition withdrawing.
Sorry, it appears that I missed a part of your question.
The statement on
The
with
second part about raising awareness, what it means to be
In
in
power.
power, the responsibility being forced to vote.
yes. I think your
I don't
statement
know
was
if it's really for OSCE ODIHR to come up with a recommendation on awareness raising, but I do know, and I see a few organizations in this room that will stay behind also after these elections and really indeed work with these issues. So I think it's important that, being such a dominant party, it's something you consciously handle and take into consideration working also with changing law. As I mentioned, make it an inclusive process and to assure a good level playing field. I think it's also mentioned in the process of changes of the constitution, and I only can reiterate that it's a very important issue.
Do we have anyone else? Okay, well, then it seems we've explained things pretty well. All that's left, I guess, is to thank you again for being with us this afternoon. Remind you that you can pick up copies of the preliminary statement in both Georgian and English on the table outside, as well as the press release from today's press conference. And I wish you all a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you so much.
Put on my shoes.
Okay. Excuse my language.
Anytime